at the minutes from last week's meeting, and if there's a motion to adopt those, we'll entertain that.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Minutes are adopted. Where's Vicky? No. Okay, item number 1 under new business, approval of disbursement from District 6 Improvement Fund. Councilman Fail.
Yes, I'd like $500 from my community fund for crafts for the special needs class at Black High School.
Okay, any questions, gentlemen? Comments?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item is approved. Item number 2 under new business. Ordinance amending sections 222 and 223 of the Code of Tuscaloosa relating to compensation of the City Council and President Pro Tem to commence after the 2025 municipal elections. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask if we would refer this over to Admin and Policy Committee.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item is referred to Admin and Policy. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Busby. I appreciate this opportunity to the Finance Committee and the City Council for moving your regularly scheduled meeting in Doherty Room into council chambers. It is, before I get into the budget itself, the recommendations, it's an honor to have Mike Wright here, I call him our CFO emeritus, that is here at the city. He's in the back row back there. Mike, raise your hand.
Get down here, Mike.
As I was doing the math, it's hard for me to believe this is my 19th budget presentation to the City Council. Mike is the one who certainly taught me governmental finance and taught me the business of the city. And so it's always good to have a mentor here, somebody that made such a difference in my life. I want to begin the presentation by thanking our accounting and finance team staff. I have the honor of presenting really their incredible work. Most people don't realize that the budget that we're presenting today, the work began shortly around mid-March as we closed the audit from the previous fiscal year. It takes months and months of work to get to the point of having recommendations to the City Council. Carly Standridge, our CFO, Becky Sheaf, our Deputy CFO, and London Jenkins, who manages the budgets for the city, they have done yeoman's work, and I certainly thank you for your incredible due diligence on this budget. I also want to thank our department heads who are in the audience today. This will be the first time they will see their budgets, and the budgets will be released. And Carly and Becky in London will be very popular after this meeting, so they can begin seeing what the recommendation that will be coming to you looks like. They did a fantastic job. When we get into agency funding, you will see this theme, but we asked our department heads in most cases, except, and you will see those exceptions, to hold their budgets whole except for what we're recommending for police. Hold it to where we are today. And they have done a terrific job of meeting that challenge. And lastly, I want to thank our communications department who puts together these presentations. We could not do it without them. In particular, I want to thank Sarah Bridget Gilmore. The due diligence she does to make this happen, I can't thank you enough for all the good work in putting this together. I also want to thank everyone who's been involved with the budget because we had a degree of difficulty we were not expecting. And it wasn't the economy, it was foot surgery for me, which is why I am sitting today and not standing, just trying to, as precaution, but unexpected surgery, a little bit unexpected longer recovery, which pushed us to the limits of getting this budget done into you today. And for those who are at home, you can go to Tuscaloosa.com/25budget to get a copy of this presentation. The budget book itself is in the printer's office. So once the budget book is printed, you will get, of course, the council obviously will get a copy. The same copy of that goes to the City Council will be online for the public to be able to inspect. Again, that's Tuscaloosa.com/25budget. So each budget has its own rhythm and dominant themes for me over the last 19 years. In 2008, and I know Mike remembers this, we were facing the verge of a national economic collapse as the Great Recession was coming in. In 2011, as we were preparing the 2012 budget, we were wondering, how do you address the budget needs for 87% of your city when 13% of it is destroyed and you're likely going to have to cash flow $50 million? And certainly none of us will forget the theme of COVID, where in some cases we had to reduce budgets by as much as 38%, not knowing what the future held in those heady days. So what is the dominant theme coming out of this year's budget? And it is safe, strong, and responsible. Safe meaning the investments into TPD. That is an investment into having safe neighborhoods, having safe communities. It's also an investment to ensure that in fiscal year 27, on October 1, 2026, we will have converted all firefighters and police officers into RSA. That is, from a budgetary standpoint, the greatest for us objective moving forward. Strong is that you will see a budget with an ever-increasing fund balance, and certainly helps us weather the storms, both current and unexpected. And responsible. You will see throughout the budget presentation that we are adjusting our growth projections to the current economy. You will see, frankly, disturbing trends within the lodging sector that I think we all have to keep an eye on, a slowdown of sales taxes, and certainly the inflationary pressures that are out there. Just as our constituents feel that in the grocery stores, we feel that throughout every one of our 19 departments of the city. And the other responsibility that we have in this budget, it's still, as we'll talk about in a little bit of detail, that SSUT continues to take away from the city's coffers. The dollars that we have earned go to other places. And that is something we will continue to work hard at the city to try to fix. So the budget itself wraps around our 4 core beliefs of the city, and we challenge every department head when presenting their budget that they have to meet one of these 4 core beliefs. So what does the overall budget recommendation picture look like? From a 40,000-foot level, the general fund is $198.5 million, Elevate Tuscaloosa, $29.9 million, and the water and sewer fund, $75.8 million. If you're adding the numbers up at home, that's over $300 million worth of operating budgets that this council ultimately has the responsibility of adopting. And if I can take a step back, and certainly this is my opinion, but I believe it to be true, is my greatest responsibility to the taxpayers of Tuscaloosa is recommending this budget. And I believe your greatest responsibility as a council member is adopting a budget that reflects the needs of the taxpayer. That is our number one priority. We can't accomplish anything else unless we have the revenues to do it now and into the future. And certainly, this is what makes a day like this so important to the future of Tuscaloosa. The budget that I'm recommending has $81 million invested into public safety. In terms of education, you continue to see a strong lean in to what we do every day, especially pre-K, summer learning, and dual enrollment. And I could, as you know, I could go on and on about all of these, but I certainly take great pride now in seeing that 1,577 students have earned 6,357 course credits because of what Elevate Tuscaloosa is doing. And so many of our academically at-risk 4-year-old, nearly universal, have pre-K because of the commitment of this city council. We're often asked, what are we doing for the children of Tuscaloosa? I think we can answer with open honesty a lot, and it wouldn't be done if it wasn't for this city council. We're investing $59.1 million into infrastructure and $5.3 million into our unbelievable public servants here at the city of Tuscaloosa. Unmanned aerial systems provide us an opportunity that we have never had in this city's history. And certainly we have this because of the amazing work of the Tuscaloosa Police Department. The recommendation that we are providing to you today is a $1.2 million investment that will consolidate all city drone programs under the Tuscaloosa Police Department. This certainly will maximize our situational awareness. It uniforms the information that's taken from the drones itself. It aids us in rapid and precise emergency response, and it can help identify infrastructure needs. So let me go into a little bit about exactly what that is. First, in responding to calls for service, when we have a call for service, we know that some are acute or true emergencies. Others may be a fender bender. Under the program that we're recommending, we will have 4 pod stations that you saw at the beginning of the video stationed throughout the city of Tuscaloosa. Each drone, within 30 seconds to a minute of that phone call into E911, can be launched then to a situation and have a estimated time of arrival between 4 to 5 minutes, depending upon the proximity to where the pod station is located. It can evaluate, our cyber intelligence team from the air, from TPD, can begin to then evaluate what is going on within that call for service, and then to look to see what assets we need to deploy and when. This will certainly help us in terms of triaging situations throughout the city of Tuscaloosa. With search and rescue operations, you saw the heat monitoring that can take place with our search and rescue operations. It certainly helps in crowd monitoring during large events. Tuscaloosa, 7 to 8 times a year, becomes Alabama's largest city for about 16 days. You cannot staff a police department for that eventuality. Having a robust unmanned aerial system gives us an extra advantage, and it also helps us in pursuit and supporting our patrol officers when we have to locate a suspect. The tools that it provides us, from undercover operations to officer safety, is immense. And we are excited about demonstrating what this can do as we go through the budget process. But it's more than just police. We want to consolidate it under TPD. But this is a tool that helps fire and rescue. Imagine you have a fire at 2200 University Boulevard. A drone is launched from a pod. It will likely beat the fire department to the scene. The heat recognition cameras can begin evaluating the scene. We believe we have the technology and 24 to 36 months from now, the capability that the trucks that are arriving on scene will begin seeing the images before they even arrive, so they can begin evaluating the scene in terms of search and rescue. The possibilities are endless. And we would not be in this, quite frankly, we would not be in this situation if it wasn't for the great job of Zark and Corey and the entire team in our cyber intelligence division. But it's more than just fire and rescue, Tuscaloosa Police Department. As you saw in the drone video, we can evaluate our infrastructure. We can take survey data. We can look for clearance areas at the airport. It's going to save us tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of services right now we're having to contract out for that we can put on demand. One story I'll share with you quickly was back in the Father's Day flood, I believe, of 2021. One of the tools we were able to have, and we were a very small operation then, was to put a drone up in the air to begin looking for a water pipe that we knew was leaking. And we were looking for temperature variations within the water streams, knowing that's likely where the leak would be. To have a more robust system, certainly for the city, gives us a large area or a large opportunity to respond to many different types of crises. So the essential upgrades that you will see within the budget itself is 4 docking stations placed around the city to allow a response time of less than 5 minutes. We will also be requesting drone response vehicles to ensure personnel and that we are 24/7 operation at the city of Tuscaloosa when it comes to our cyber intelligence division. We will need high-performance computer workstations because we will be collecting a lot of data. That data has to be not only stored but analyzed, which requires a large amount of infrastructure investment, IT infrastructure investment, and 6 new crime and intelligence analysts to make this work. The personnel cost is $671,000. This is for fiscal year 25, so this would be a year one cost, and it certainly would be, hopefully, in perpetuity, with an initial startup of equipment cost of $537,000. And if it wasn't for Lieutenant Burns and Director Zark, I have complete confidence. What I'm trying to say very poorly is I have complete confidence in what they put forward. Chief Blankley has made this a priority within TPD. We have people from throughout the state and southeast who are coming to see what we do. And I think let's don't hold static. Let's use it as a great leveraging standpoint to make Tuscaloosa safer. So I want to switch gears and go through the budget itself. The first budget stat that I think is important is that from fiscal 22 to fiscal 23, our fund balance grew from $65.8 million to $76.4 million. You can look at the totals there, but again, that's a very positive sign and reflects the conservative fiscal management of this city. And as someone who's gone through a great recession, a natural disaster, and a pandemic, I can tell you one of the tools that you have to have in any emergency is a strong budget, because that gives you the ability to respond. So overall in the budget itself, environmental fees, service fees, we're recommending a $1.25 month increase. Just a reminder that we provide our customers at the City of Tuscaloosa in this year's budget, the total subsidy a year is $305. So we do not charge the cost of environmental services. So how does that break out? $103 of that 305 comes from the general fund, and then $201 comes from Elevate. As part of the Elevate Tuscaloosa, we initially wanted to do a sales tax exemption on groceries. We were unable to be successful in the Alabama legislature. The IRS tax tables told us that amount would have been around $200 a year. So because of that, we tried to maintain around a $200 subsidy coming out of Elevate on our garbage, trash, and recycling bills. We are recommending a $10.59 per month increase in water and sewer. Water and sewer is not a government service. Water and sewer is a utility, and we'll talk a little bit about this later. It's just like Comcast, AT&T, and other utilities. It must pay for itself. And when it doesn't, we see the issues that we ran into in the last part of the previous decade. And this council has been committed to getting back on track. And so we're recommending a $10.59 per month increase to the average residential bill for fiscal year 25. So diving into the general fund itself, I want to begin by taking a look at our peers. And you know this, but I think it's something to be very proud of. We're always compared to the top 10 cities in Alabama. The city of Mobile has a city sales tax rate of 5. We have a city sales tax of 3. We should be very proud of what we do with the resources that we're provided. If you added in, even if you wanted to add in our share of countywide sales tax to slide it in our favor, we'd be at 3.57. So again, we would still be behind the majority of the largest cities in Alabama. Again, this is something this council should take great pride in. We're asked about our debt service and how do we compare to the other 10 cities. And again, you can see where we fall with the other cities in Alabama. You see cities as high as $1 billion, and you see cities as low as Dothan with $13 million in debt. So Tuscaloosa, especially with the investments that we made with Elevate Tuscaloosa, falls right in the middle with a percentage of 7.5% of our general fund budget that's allocated towards debt service. In terms of what we're recommending for our employees, we're recommending this year an overall 6% increase for our public safety employees. This is a 2.5% step that you see on the far right of the screen, and then a 3.5% COLA. One of the differences between the public safety pay schedule and the non-public safety is the steps are 2.5% in public safety, 1.5% in non-public safety. For non-public safety employees, we're recommending one-step movement at 1.5% and then a 4.5% COLA. So our goal in this budget to you was to recommend the same amount for public safety as non-public safety, which is how we came to the equalization of 6%. So how do we compare in terms of what we fund our employees versus national average? So the gray line that you see here, that is public safety employees. The yellow line that you see here are exempt employees at the city of Tuscaloosa. And the red line that you see here are non-exempt. So the blue line that cuts across here, I'm drawing on it right there, that is the national wage index, and here is the cost of inflation. So I think we can say without a shadow of a doubt that this city and this city council have invested in our employees, and we should have no shame in doing so. We can have the best equipment, the best vehicles, the best technology. It is all for naught without the best employees. And I'm proud to have a budget that makes this recommendation. But there is a challenge in this budget. There's a 12% cost of health insurance. The city is self-insured. We had a very difficult year claims-wise. We had a couple of cases that were extremely costly in our health insurance cost portfolio this year. We are self-insured, so we must pay those costs. So for employees, we have, I think, about 80 to 85% of our employees opt into our insurance program. So you do have some employees this will not impact, but for most of us, we will be impacted by this. So for an employee-owned health insurance, we get paid bi-weekly, and this is taken out over 24 checks instead of 26. The employee will have a $14.75 on the low end or $2.12 increase depending upon which option of health insurance, all the way to our most expensive health insurance, which would be $29.79 per paycheck or $24.76 under option 2. So here's the thing, though, is that all employees, even our lowest paid employees, will still see a pay increase despite the 12% increase in health insurance, which was another reason why we made the recommendation on the non-public safety side to match the public safety side to ensure that every employee sees that benefit. In terms of overall revenue sources that we have at the city of Tuscaloosa, you see that we're dominated by sales and use tax. 13% of our overall general fund budget's made up of business license, with 12% coming from property tax. We receive 5% in indirect cost reimbursement from our utility. 5% comes from lodging tax. 2% comes from environmental services subsidy from Elevate. That's to create that $201 subsidy you saw earlier. 2% comes from environmental services fees, and then rental and commercial taxes make up another 4%. But if you want to know where we pay our services, it really comes from that line item right there. So when you look at the major discretionary revenues, and every year I point this out to the council because you want to go and I want to go do things that positively impact the people that pay our salary, the people that we work for every single day. Sales tax, use tax, internet, ad valorem, liquor, lodging, dwelling, business license, county sales tax. Those are the revenues that you have complete discretion over as a city council, that you can go in and make the difference that you want to make. Here's our problem, and this gets to the responsible side of the budget presentation that I gave you earlier. We only grew, or we're projecting in the 25 budget to only grow by $3.3 million. That is $2 million short of the employee investment of $5.3 million that you saw earlier. One of the things that you will see from our agencies are a request for more money. And in our agency budgets, we have tried to do our best. But let me be clear, I put the city first. It's Tuscaloosa first. So I made certain that we took care of our employees and then work outward. Because if we don't deliver our core services, we cannot continue to push forward and keep this city moving and growing. So this gives me a chance. I know that you're aware of this, but I think it's very important to the public. And it's very important to PARA, the library, TTS, the other agencies that we fund as well. Because the city is facing a new dynamic that I'm hopeful that our legislature will solve, because we do not have the authority to solve it ourselves. So this first table that I'm showing you illustrates the census growth from 1990 to 1999. The city only grew by 5% during that decade. Yet during that same decade, our sales tax grew by 75%. So what that meant is for every 1% of population growth, you got 15% of sales tax growth. Now, 1999 was the first year that the Department of Commerce, through the U.S. Census Bureau, began tracking the amount of retail sales that happened online. So minimum impact to what was going on. But then you begin to see in the next decade the impact. The city's population grew by 20%. And under that ratio, we should have had phenomenal sales tax growth. Yet our sales tax growth was only 30%. That ratio drops 9 times less to 1.5%. So now you go from 1 to 15 to 1 to 1.5. You get to 2010, 2020, again, you see a slight growth of 2.4%. And so far, for this decade, 12% population growth, but only 23% in sales tax growth. So what does this mean? It means we are not capturing the benefits of the population growth. Since 2000, this city has grown by 34,000. That is something to be proud of, but you know what else has grown? Our service delivery portfolio. Garbage, trash, recycling, police and fire protection, infrastructure needs throughout the city, whether roads, stormwater, fiber. We're getting 100% of those expenditure costs, but we're getting pennies of the dollar on the revenues that should come with it. And this is a dynamic that I'm hopeful that our Alabama legislature will begin to tackle. So you're aware of me talking about SSUT, and so if this is where you would like to take a nap, I would encourage you to do so, but this is more for the people at home. Is when we say SSUT, it's the Internet Sales Tax. And it was a law passed by the Alabama legislature in 2015, and it was meant, in fact, it's in the act itself, to mirror a sales tax. Alabama was a pioneer in that program. But there was a case in 2019 called the Wayfair case that basically required then those companies, those out-of-state internet-based companies, or they could be required and have to enroll into a state program. So when you hear SSUT, that is the internet sales tax that we talk about. So what does that mean in revenue loss? Now, this comes from the best methodology we can put together, but let me be clear. We've asked the Alabama Department of Revenue, in fact, we actually presented legislation for them to go in and provide the data themselves. But this is a methodology used by the Big Ten cities. Tuscaloosa, in fiscal year 23, we estimate we lost $7,098,000 in SSUT. 2 years later, I can assure you that number is even higher. You start with Huntsville at 14.4, and you work to Decatur all the way down to 3.7. Just, again, imagine is considered one of the strongest words in the English language. Just imagine what we could do for our citizens with the $7 million we earned, by the way. Not $7 million that we were hoped to be given. I'm talking about $7 million that we earned. So that's the calculation that we use. By the way, that's based off 15%. The Department of Commerce has just updated that number now to 16%. So 16% of all traditional online sales, or traditional sales that took place, are now online. And for Tuscaloosa, the problem hits even worse. So why is that? Well, let's look at how that's split. The state of Alabama gets 4 cents of sales tax. So in Tuscaloosa County, when you pay 10 cents, 4 cents goes to the state. SSUT, the state kept its 4 cents. So how does local governments, what do they get with their 4% of the 8% sales tax rate? So the state's formula is this. There's 463 cities. We get 2.4%, we being the local cities, and that is then divided up by population. And then the counties, there are 67 counties, they get 40%, so it's divided up by this ratio. So clear as mud, right? So let's take a real life example. Let's go down to Morgan Hunt's, Velo City, and let's go take $100, Mr. Lanier, because I know you got that on you right now. We can go over there right now and spend $100. So $4 goes to the state, $3 goes to the city, $3 goes to the county. Now remember, in the county, we have a state law, the 3-cent countywide sales tax, that requires those dollars to be divided up. So 25% of that $3 needs to go to the county schools. They would get 75 cents. The city schools would get 20%, so they would get 60 cents. The county would get 43 cents. The city of Tuscaloosa gets 19, that 0.57 that I talked about earlier, the 3.57. Northport would get 15. The Road Improvement Commission would get 30, and DCH would get 20. So when we go spend that $100 at Morgan's Shop, a local business with great local employees, the city of Tuscaloosa would get $3.57, and these entities here, they would get those amounts, okay? So that's traditional online sales. But let's say, Cassius has had a long day. Mr. Lanier's had a very long day. He's just going to go home and buy whatever he was going to buy at Velo City, but he's going to go to Cannondale online. So no problem for the state. State gets their $4, they're rocking and rolling. They're good as gold. So what about local governments? Now it goes into those pots that I talked about earlier. So that $4 is split here, split there. So what happens when it comes out of the wash? That $2.40 goes into the municipal bucket. We are at 3.52%. Why? Because our population is 111,388, and you divide that by the municipal population of 3.1 million. So guess what? We get 8 cents. We get 8 cents. Sometimes the formulas don't work in your favor. Again, it's Mr. Lanier goes to his home. He buys it online. A delivery truck using city roads, city infrastructure, relying on city protection, delivers to his house. He gets 8 cents. So the city in that transaction loses $3.49. Now imagine that happening 16% of the time. When you hear me preach about SSUT, this is why. The city is slowly, its sales tax base is slowly being eroded, and we're impacted more than most. Why? Look at our average age. We are 29 and a half years old, and there's really no secret. You just go about a mile east, and you hit about 35,000 18 to 22-year-olds. And you look who's buying online in Alabama. 47% of under 18 buy online. 32% of 25 to 34-year-olds buy online. The city of Tuscaloosa and probably the city of Auburn, even smaller cities like Troy, Jacksonville State, Tuskegee, where you have younger populations who are shopping online, are losing out on tens of millions of dollars. This is the greatest revenue threat in the city's history, and it has to be addressed. Because you as a city council are prohibited by law to implement an occupational tax. You as a city council are basically limited by Alabama law to do a property tax. You, under Alabama law, are prohibited from doing a gasoline tax. You are capped on your business licenses by state law. You do not have a lot of places to go to make up the lost revenue under Alabama's Constitution and Alabama's laws. I want to also say, though, even more importantly, because we take it from a city standpoint, it hurts small businesses. It hurts businesses like Manna Grocery, Southern Ale House. in Piggly Wiggly. When you see those Kroger trucks that I'll talk about in a second, that's doing Jay Wellburn no favors at Piggly Wiggly. Now, you see that handsome kid right here, looked a little tired after soccer practice? I know that kid. He's handsome, smart, just like his dad, from what I understand. That shirt says Southern Ale House. That is who bought the jerseys for his soccer team. How many Diamonds Direct soccer jerseys have you seen? I saw a lot of Taco Casa growing up. You know, I saw a lot of different, Parker Towing and everyone else. I don't see any Amazon shirts or Diamonds Direct shirts in Tuscaloosa. The people that fund things in our community are our local businesses. And yet, their competition is getting a 2% advantage by state law. The state of Alabama is literally saying that Amazon is more important than Southern Ale House. Amazon is more important than Piggly Wiggly. That is something we have to change. I'm going to give you one other example, Poogie Pool. We all know Poogie. In 1985, he started Hudson Pool, has 15 full-time employees. The guy generates significant sales taxes. He donates tens of thousands of dollars to charities. The Cancer Center is one that comes to mind, but certainly school programs. Poogie will tell you his competition is not Fincher and Osmond. His competition is Diamonds Direct. Because people will literally come in the store, see the diamond that they want, and then order it off of Diamonds Direct, 2% cheaper. And this advantage is codified under state law. And that should change. Why else should it change? Because this jeopardizes public safety. 40% of the general fund budget that I present to you today goes directly into public safety. And as I talked about earlier, 60% of our revenues are based off the traditional economy. And we really don't have a lot of other places to pull from. And 75% of those traditional revenues are your discretionary revenues that you can use to fund other city services. One last thing on this, and then I'll move on, is it's getting any worse. I don't know how many of you have seen the Kroger delivery trucks here in Tuscaloosa. Kroger has a delivery service that the Alabama Department of Revenue has classified as SSUT. So when you call Kroger and Kroger Delivery Service, they have 7 locations in Alabama plus a distribution site. That is now taxed at 8% instead of 10%. So what the state of Alabama is telling Jay Wellburn is that a store that's not even here can go online, compete against him at a tax rate that is cheaper than his. There are major issues with SSUT. One more example. If I brought you in, if I went over to Jalapenos and Giovanni, and I said, Giovanni, give me $100 worth of food for the council, and I walked over there and got it, we would pay 10%. If I call DoorDash, we'd only pay 8%. So just by calling DoorDash, we would lose $3.49, we being the city of Tuscaloosa. This is why our sales tax revenues are stabilizing. That is a threat, a financial threat to everything that we do at the city of Tuscaloosa. And so again, I'm not as happy as he is in that commercial, because I don't know about you, but if my house is on fire, I'm not calling Kroger Delivery Service. I'm calling Tuscaloosa Fire and Rescue. And I want the best firefighter with the best equipment to save me and my family. This is truly something we have to continue to push our legislature to address and not accept that it's too hard or too difficult. We don't tell our firefighters, our police officers, and all of our public servants, it's just don't do it, it's too difficult. We would never accept that, and we shouldn't accept that from people who we elect. So this is why it's important. Look at the 23, 24, and 25 collections. This year, we're literally projecting less sales tax revenue in a city that's growing in this upcoming budget. Again, our cost of services go up dramatically. The primary revenues that would pay for it will go down. Nearly identical with the countywide sales tax. And of course, business license is a look in the rearview mirror. So we have to project prior year collection on business licenses because we know what the prior year is going to be. Therefore, we cannot recommend to this council any growth. We do believe, because property tax certainly is a more stable and predictable tax, we can predict a little bit of growth on the property tax line item. But as you see with lodging tax, I think I don't have to draw this arrow, but I think you see we collected $11 million in 2023. We are projecting only we're only projecting $10.4 million in collections this year. And that's why you see that we're recommending $10.4 million in terms of revenue for fiscal '25. So in moving on from the revenue side into the expenditure side, where do we spend our money? 40%, 22% in police, fire and rescue, 18%. And certainly you can see the other aspects of what we do at the city of Tuscaloosa. When you look at the types of expenditures that we have, the largest expenditure is going to be salaries and benefits at 65%. Agency funding at 8% would be one of our next largest, followed by debt service. So public safety escrow. As y'all recall, we set this fund in 2021 to first help us improve our pay schedule for fire and police. The second was to begin the transition into RSA. The budget that we're recommending is going to put another about $1.4 million to give us I say nest egg for lack of a better term, as we make that transition into RSA. We certainly feel that number needs to get higher, as we know that 28, 29, and 30 are going to be difficult years in that transition. The good news is that your accounting and finance team is so far ahead of the curve that we are preparing and planning for it. And this year's budget continues that transition into RSA. We will not fail in making that happen. So I like to go back and look at the budgets that I proposed versus my first budget at the city. And I can tell you that this city is dramatically different from 19 years ago than where we were today. But as you'll see, the budgets have not changed a lot. The biggest difference is that in 2007, we were at 60% salary and benefits. Today, we're at 65% of budget. Two primary reasons. Number one is the heavy investment into public safety salaries. That has certainly bumped up our salary and benefits line item. Two are the employees that we brought on because of Elevate, but those are reimbursed back into the general fund from Elevate itself. So a good picture of where we were and where we are as a city. So I'm going to briefly go through Elevate itself that was passed in 2019. These are the 5 core areas of Elevate that you know well, from public safety to connectivity. If you remember anything about Elevate, remember this today. We have collected a little over $100 million in taxes with Elevate. Thanks to our team here at the city, we've already matched it dollar per dollar. $104 million worth of matching funds, either through grants or private donations. That is something to be proud of, and not as a mayor, but as a city resident here, I see the transformation happening across my hometown, and that's something we can be proud of. In terms of the overall maintenance budget that we prepared, and I believe one of the great things that we did back in 2019 is we set aside 15% of Elevate funds to go towards operation and maintenance. You will see that at the end of the day, we project a $3.4 million surplus in that fund, and that will help us cover the cost. That's after we cover the cost of these things here to fund Elevate Parks. I do want to note, Elevate has taken over the maintenance of took over the maintenance of Western Riverwalk. We are taking over from Para the maintenance of Carlton Park, Snow Hidden Park. We've already taken over J.C. Park. Northern Riverwalk is still us, and Parker Hong. The reason why I highlight Carlton Park, Snow Hidden Park, and J.C. Park is the city is taking on $200,000 in maintenance costs. So that is relieving Para of $200,000 of maintenance cost. And when we get into agency funding, that's an important point. The city's taking on $200,000, but we're relieving Para of $200,000 of expenditure costs. to keep it to that Elevate standard. In terms of revenues, we're projecting a net total of $24.9 million. And as I mentioned earlier, we're doing some amazing things in education, including the dual enrollment. And how can you not smile when you see that great picture about the future of Tuscaloosa? And by the way, go Falcons.
Go Falcons.
1 out of every $5 that we spend on Elevate goes into public safety. And as we look at transitioning into RSA, that may be a number that needs to go higher. And that's certainly going to be a discussion that we will have with this council and future councils as we can, especially if SSUT is not resolved by our state legislature. So last, let me transition into Tuscaloosa Water. As I show you every year, it is one of the most affordable utilities, one of the most affordable items that we have here in the city. We're still trying to figure out who knew the cost of a gallon of wine, but okay. But we have a gallon of coffee at $26.40, a gallon of milk at $4.20. Mr. Connor, that was you that gave us that gallon of wine cost, and a gallon of bottled water. Now, I could tell you a handle of Jack Daniels, but I don't know if I could tell you a gallon of wine. You look at what it costs for tap water. Again, very, very cheap, the service we're able to provide. And then when you compare ourselves against other utilities, the average monthly water bill in the city of Tuscaloosa is $83.47. You compare that to power, cable, and gas. And of course, this time of year, especially if you're power and water, those numbers are just higher because it is the warmer and higher usage months. You see our budget recommendations in terms of the revenue comparisons and the continued growth that we have there thanks to the leadership of this council. Right now, unlike our sales tax growth, we are averaging 11% annual growth, which in large part helps us fund our $300 million worth of infrastructure investments we're making across the city. And you see that we're recommending a pretty healthy revenue increase for from fiscal year 24 to fiscal 25 on water revenues, and the same for sewer revenues. When you look at the expenditure types that we have within water and sewer, it's utility. So it's going to be different than the way that you look at a general fund. Only 23% of the water and sewer fund is salaries and benefits, but 19% of it is debt service. Again, being a utility itself, that is right in range. One of the questions that the council always wants us to cover, and we certainly will cover it in this presentation today, is how do we calculate indirect cost? So we calculate the indirect cost to be, the actual cost to be $8.4 million, and my budget is going to transfer 8.1. So what's indirect cost? Well, I'm not wise like Mr. Crow and know accounting, but indirect cost to me is this. If the water and sewer department were to begin to create its own utility, what would it cost to operate it? What would be the cost that the general fund would no longer provide for them to operate alone? So let's look at that. By the way, this doesn't cover public works, which does a lot of the asphalting after we do water and sewer work. We estimate there are $8.4 million in services that the general fund provides the utility. Again, we use a 12% calculation across the board, which gives us the $8.1 million that you see in our department. But as you go through this, and I certainly for the sake of time won't go through every one, but 23% of the vehicles that go through our fleet maintenance department are water and sewer. 36% of the documents that go through city attorney's office are water and sewer. 37% of the total budget is water and sewer. Water and sewer as a utility takes up a lot of cost of the general fund, which is why you have the indirect cost. And as I think, Mr. Busby, I mentioned to you in an earlier meeting when I was with the city school system, we did the exact same thing with our child nutrition programs at every school. So again, the then and now. In 2007, my first budget to the city council, the water and sewer salaries and benefits budget was 27%. Our debt service, can you imagine, was 30%, what we inherited. Today, you see that salaries and benefits is at 23%. and our debt service is at 19%. That is something that's to celebrate, and it began with people like Mike Wright, and it continues under the leadership of Ms. Standridge. So that is an overview of the 2000 fiscal 25 budget recommendation. As I mentioned earlier, you can go to tuscaloosa.com/ to get a copy of the 25 budget. We will have the full budget book up there by August 27th. And as I close, the last group I want to thank is the City Council, and I want to thank Mr. Busby for the meetings that we've held over the past month. They have helped us considerably. Mr. Crow, as both chair and vice chair, we appreciate the conversations that we've had with you. We work very diligently, not just through the 6 months of the budget process, but all year to listen and listen hard and try to meet the needs of your constituents. And we appreciate the opportunity to work with you. We look forward to the budget process as we wrap up August and get into September. And I have no doubt that, I don't know if the city has never not adopted its budget on time, and I have every hope and belief we will not break the record in 2024 for the 2025 budget. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but certainly I think the substantive part of our work will happen in the meetings that will be forthcoming. That's all I
Mayor,
have.
thank you very much. Gentlemen, ladies, any questions or comments on the budget?
Thank you
Or
so
the
much,
budget
Mr. Mayor.
presentation?
Thank you so much for this presentation, and I'm very intrigued on the public safety side about the drones and how it's going to impact public safety with our city. Looking forward to more discussions on it.
It's exciting.
Mr. Chairman, I look forward
Sure.
to diving into details of this, and there's a lot of good things in this we need to discuss. Looking forward to that, and appreciate it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank
Well,
you.
get your
Appreciate the
bathing
staff,
cap and
too.
get your bathing cap and your nose plugs in, and we'll dive in. To the audience, I assume that looks like staff. Thanks for being here. Are there any other issues to be brought before Finance Committee? Not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Finance Committee